Hi, my name is Nathan Reiniger. I am a PhD candidate at the University of Maryland. This is joint work I do with my co-authors, Bruce, Michelle, and Blaise. Bruce and Blaise are both from the University of Chicago. Michelle is from the University of Maryland. Today's talk is about Google Ad settings. This is Google's ad preference manager providing transparency about why you may have received certain ads based on your tracking profile. The talk will start with the motivation. Why is it that we're looking at ad settings? Why do we care about the ad settings page and transparency in general? And then we'll turn to the methodology that we use to assess ad settings. How did we gather participants and how did we analyze all of the participants' data in a study to assess their ad settings data? And what are some of the results that we have in the paper? What do we learn about the ad settings page? A good place to start is with what is ad settings? So ad settings is a transparency effort, but what does that mean in context? Well, many of us are, we're all familiar with ads, and we may also be familiar with the term called online behavioral advertising. This refers to a practice that trackers and advertisers engage in, where we are going to be visiting certain websites like shoes, and then we're going to be seeing those same shoes on later websites that we visit. So shirts or coffee or some type of body product could fall into the same type of category. We are having retargeting occurring. Transparency is important here because it gives us a sense of why we're receiving certain ads over other ads when online behavioral advertising is occurring, and online behavioral advertising is the norm. So I know that I'm receiving an ad for coffee because somebody thinks I'm interested in coffee. Why is this important, though? Why do we care that transparency can happen in these ad dashboards, and why is this even a good thing? Well, back in 2008, Target, in some ways showed us why it's a good thing. They had been predicting the due dates for pregnancy of women, and they've been figuring out that there are a certain set of products that if you purchase these products, you can predict when someone will have a baby. And that can be a really good thing for advertising because it, is a time when most people buy a lot of baby-oriented things. So Target was doing this, and it actually quickly realized that people were fairly creeped out by this. If Target sent you an ad for congratulations on the new baby, here's some products you might be interested in buying, you would probably think, well, wait a minute, I haven't had my baby shower yet. That's a bit creepy. So what Target did is it started mixing very non-pregnancy ads in with these baby ads so that people wouldn't know that Target knew that they were being individualized for this particular type of information. So this is in some sense the opposite of what we might hope would happen. So we know that tracking is creepy. Researchers back in 2012, when they were looking at online behavioral advertising, this is the Smart, Useful, Scary, Creepy study, they learned that creepiness is one of the perceptions that people have of online behavioral advertising. So if you see this example on the right here where the advertiser is saying, this Mother's Day is coming up, and I know you live in this state, your mom lives in this state. This is a nice mug that says, love knows no bounds, which is kind of creepy to say that I know your location of you and your mom. So this is something we know, and regulators have started taking note of this as well. The infographic in the middle there is a timeline where the darker colors represent more GDPR-style data protection regulations over time. And this is since 2012. So we can see that there has been this explosion of interest in regulating this online tracking, in part because people find it creepy. So we're wanting more protection for our data. The response from companies has been to protect this data in the form of providing transparency. Protection may not be the right word to use there. So they're trying to offer transparency. Sunlight is the best disinfectant is a common statement here. And so what these companies are doing is providing that sign. They're providing that transparency to give users some comfort about why they may receive certain ads. So to recap, tracking is creepy. Sunlight is a great disinfectant. But what we want to know as researchers in this study is how good are these transparency efforts? How bright is that sunlight that these companies are providing? More specifically, what can we learn about ad settings? Is ad setting something that evolves over time? Very little research in the past has looked at how these ad profile managers are longitudinally updated and evolve as the user is engaging with the internet. Do they differ between participants? Is my ad profile very different from someone else's ad profile? How accurate are the profiles in terms of demographics? In particular, we looked at age and gender, and how reactive are the ad profiles. If I am browsing some websites on shoes, is that going to show up in my ad profile? And then if I switch to browsing family vacation locations, is that going to show up in my profile? And how smooth is that transition? And then finally, are these ad profile managers filtered? So is ad settings missing some information that it could have, but it for some reason doesn't? To give you a better perspective of what ad settings is, we're going to look at an ad settings profile. This is not my ad settings profile, but this is what they look like. At least this is what they looked like at the time when the study occurred. Ad settings has recently renamed and slightly revamped to My Ad Center. So this is generally a collection of what we are calling attributes. We can see that there's demographics here: age 18 to 44, language English, gender female. There are also interests, so animated films, childcare, cooking recipes, dogs, these types of things. Companies, so this would be something like Nordstrom, or maybe you're looking for a popular new backpack or something. Videos from very likely YouTube channels. So this is 3 videos from Secret Deodorant. That's a YouTube channel that this participant, this data may have been watching. And also location, world locations. Could be anywhere in the world. It goes up to city. We're calling all of these together attributes. Here's our study design. This is a study with 158 participants, and I'll note that this study is a carve-out from a larger study. We were interested in tracking transparency generally, and so we conducted a larger study with more participants. The ad settings data is a unique piece that we are highlighting here. So we had 115 participants that we crowdsourced from Prolific, which is a crowdsourcing website, and their distribution in terms of demographics is fairly common to those that are from Prolific. So we have a bit of a bent towards female versus male here. We have 34 and under for age, 35 and older, fairly even split, and most of them were a bit higher educated. In our study design, we had participants download our custom Google Chrome extension, and then they would fill out a survey, browse the web for a period of 7 days, and then answer a second survey at the end of our 2-part study design, where then we would have them uninstall the extension. The data that we are focusing on in this particular work is 2 parts. The first is a fetch of ad settings content on every 5th web page visit by the participant. So if the participant logged into Google, if they have personalized ads turned on, then we are going to fetch data every 5th website visit from there. It's something that happens automatically per the extension. We are also going to be analyzing the web page text. So as the user visits a web page, we're going to look at that text and bucket it into ad categories. You visit PetSmart.com, we look at the text on PetSmart and would say you are interested in something like dogs and cats. We had 158 participants. These participants had 12,489 unique attributes that were associated with the set of them together. And this related to 46,457 fetches of the ad settings page. This is a high-level overview of our results. I'm going to dive into each one of these more specifically. But in general, we learned that ad setting is updated, it is individualized per participant, it's accurate, it's dynamic or reactive to your web browsing, and it's filtered. The first of these is that the ad settings page is updated. One way to think about interests, somebody's interests, might be that you have this set of interests that is associated with you. This may be a common way of thinking of the ad settings page if you were to visit it, right? You're interested in dogs, pizza, and running. Those are your interests. Another way to think about interests is more of a time perspective. So on Monday, you may be interested in dogs, pizza, and running, but then on Tuesday, you're interested in anime, and so on. So this is a bit more fine-grained, and we're looking at the days here. We can actually get even more fine-grained than this, and we can say, well, here's a Monday. At this particular time, I'm interested in this particular interest. At this particular time, I'm interested in this particular interest. And here, what we're really doing is viewing the addition and subtraction of interests very granularly. So we have in the morning, breakfast foods, coffee, and dogs, and then some of those are being subtracted, and then more interests are being added as the day progresses. And what we found when we look at participant attributes, participant information, is that this is how interests in your profile behave, that third option. Each star in this graph represents a fetch of the ad settings page. The x-axis is the total number of attributes, so your most or your least count of all attributes, and then we're seeing time represented on the x-axis. If we look at all participants' ad interest attribute counts over time together, this is the type of graph that it would produce. And we can see that there's a lot of variation in these line charts. They're moving up and down very frequently. We looked at the average of what is the total number of unique attributes at the beginning of when somebody started the survey versus the end, according to the ad settings page. We found there's about 186% increase in the number of attributes that are in these profiles. We also found at any point in time of the study that more than 50% likelihood that when you see a change in ad settings, there is new information that is being added to your profile. The next result we found is that participants are quite unique when they are compared to each other. So Google is doing a good job of personalizing this targeting. So this graph is a histogram of the x-axis shows the percentage of attributes that are going to be shared. So a good way to explain this is that we have this 2 videos from Coors Light. All right, so one participant had probably watched a couple videos from Coors Light on YouTube, and that particular attribute is shared with less than 1% of the participants. So this is probably just one person here. Now, in terms of the total set of unique attributes, that percentage of it being shared is over 75% of attributes are shared in that bucket. So that 0 to 10% range of shared. That's the histogram. So what we can say is, for the most part, most attributes are not shared among participants. The attributes that are shared are very general. Shopping, books and literature, restaurants. Most of us shop, most of us eat, and most of us read. So these are very common things that are up to 100% of our participants had one of these attributes. We had also found that ad settings is highly accurate in terms of gender and age classification. Overall, if we look at gender, we can see that Google is assigning a gender correct 95% of the time when comparing the participants' self-reported gender in our survey with their ad settings gender that we pulled from the ad settings page. They were wrong 5% of the time. We have a further breakdown in our paper if you're interested in more details. Here I'm just going to provide the overview. The same can be said for age to a lesser degree. So participants are being correctly bucketed for their age 89% of the time. So there's 11% that is incorrect. And that's possibly because age has a larger distribution of buckets that it could be associated with. The fourth finding is a more of a suggested finding that we are seeing as participants are browsing the web, that browsing is affecting their ad settings profiles. We're calling this a suggested finding because we actually don't have causal evidence between visiting a web page and then seeing an update in ad settings. Remember that we fetched the ad settings page on every 5th website visit, not every single website visit, and also time could be happening in between. So this is, we have some evidence to suggest this is the case. So you have an ad, an ad profile over time here. We have the attribute counts up and down. The total set of all attributes that are here would be, a bunch of different interests. These interests are categorized into depth levels. So this particular interest on bottom here is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, a 6th depth level, starting with people in society, ending with child in car seats. And we have, because of the setup of the survey and the use of the extension, we have data that shows ad settings as this set of attributes, and then our interest inference, our engine running on web page text has this set of attributes that we have matched as well. And what we can do is we can look at how much overlap there is between those two. And when we do this, we find that there is, on that first category, so people in society in this example, an 88% overlap between the total set of attributes. And if we're looking for exact match, so child in car seats to parenting, which is not a match here, we have a 33% overlap. This is similar to some research that was conducted a few years ago, and they found a similar number of exact matches. However, they were using 100 days of browsing versus the 7 that we're using here. Our last finding was that attributes are filtered for potentially sensitive interests. So when you're browsing the web, maybe you browse 4 different websites, and maybe one of those is a potentially sensitive interest. Maybe you're visiting PlannedParenthood.com, reading up on something like abortion, which is a sensitive interest, right? Don't talk about it at the dinner table type of interest. And our question was whether that interest would show up in your ad settings profile. And what we found, and what previous literature has found as well, is that no, this is not something that will show up. If we look at the percent of sensitive interests that are in participants, either their ad settings attributes or their web inferred attributes from our own inference interest engine, then we can see a fairly stark difference between the two. So when we look at just ad settings on all participants together, so the total set of all interests specifically, not attributes, but interests, because demographics may not be sensitive, and we have a way of going about this that I'm not going to get into detail here, but we're looking at interest particularly here. So we have 3% of that total set that are sensitive versus our interest engine, which is showing 12%. So where do the rest of them go? People are visiting these websites, but it's not showing up in the ad profiles. We can also look at the average amount per person. So on average, of the websites that I visited, what's my average percent of sensitive interest out of my total set of interests? And we see a similar split. Ad setting is 3%, and the inference engine is showing 9%. So to summarize, in our measurement study, our longitudinal measurement study on ad settings, we learned some things that Google did not say about the ad settings page. Google does not say anywhere on the ad settings page that it is an updated resource, that it's really a snapshot of what is occurring based on that time rather than an overall set. And you would not know this unless you visited the ad settings page repeatedly like our fetcher did. These ad setting interests and these profiles are also individual, at least in the subset of participants that we have, 158. We see a lot of variation. The profiles are accurate in terms of gender and age. The profiles are dynamic. We have suggested evidence that the profiles change as you browse the web. And these profiles are filtered to exclude potentially sensitive interests. So I'll end here, and please come check out the paper. I have the links below, and thank you for listening.